Uneducated Economist here. So, just recently did a video talking about the housing market and some of the things that could take place within it. Really talking about the home builder sentiment and how this is going to be putting pressure within the housing market as far as adding new inventory. And it's pretty interesting when, you think about some of these things and you start talking to some of the people out there, you start finding some pretty interesting stories taking place. And so, like earlier today, I was talking with two different guys. Now, I do come from a fairly small area, so I don't come from an area that has like really big time home builders or something like that going on. These are kind of like, smaller time builders or smaller time carpenters. I mean, they might build a house once a year, maybe four houses a year, do a lot of remodel work, maybe, building pole barn kind of stuff. Cause like, again, I live in kind of a remote area, not terribly remote, but not like big cities or big like urban developments or something like that. So anyway, these two stories, one of them, guy goes, he says it was a pretty simple job, thought he offered a pretty good deal, installs some cabinets and totally gets shoot. I need to remember to turn off my notifications because it vibrates my phone. Hold on, guys. Oops. Come on. Oh, turn off. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. Anyway, so he goes and installs these cabinets, thought he offered a pretty good deal, and totally gets stiffed on the bill. And the complaint came down to, well, at least what started it was a box of screws, like a $12 box of screws. She said something about like that wasn't part of it, part of the bidding. It was just like, what are you talking about? We're installing, like, of course it is. And that started this whole thing. And then she just never just chose not to pay. And so he was just like, okay, great. Now what do? You go into litigation, go into sue or whatever. So, he's, keep sending the bills or whatever. I don't know exactly what he was planning on doing to deal with it. But it wasn't but a few hours later, I'm talking to another guy who's going through a much bigger problem as far as like he was working on a fairly big remodel for a guy and had a bunch of change orders to the project. And now again, this is all just kind of hearsay stuff, but he was telling me the story about it. And of course, like, when people are excited about getting the project moving and getting it done, they're real good about, doing these change orders. Like they want to do them. They're, willing to spend the money on it. But when it actually comes time to paying the bill, now there's a big problem on it. And it's way more than what they have ever expected. And that's the case that he is experiencing now. And so, of course, again, it's just like, you're not getting paid. Now it's time, like, what are you going to do about this? And it goes into difficulties, right? You get into difficult times because, as a small time builder, you really don't have a whole lot of room to move. So if you start getting stiffed on even a couple of these, $600 jobs, or even, even the bigger ones like this guy, where it's getting into, many thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, well, then, some money goes out, but no money comes in. Now, pretty soon, you can't really make out payroll and stuff like that. So all your guys, you have to let them all go, and you start having issues with it. Well, that's something that I've seen happen so many times being within the building supply industry. I've seen a lot of guys, start a business, get a crew together, do really well for a number of years, watching the expansion grow, and they just like, they're kind of like in the money. It's like almost no problem, especially when it comes to building a house, and houses are selling so fast. You can just build a house just about at any time. Soon as it's completed, it's sold. It's even sold before you complete it, right? Or can complete it. But now we find that that's not the case. And in many cases, we're finding where builders are like very nervous about what it is that they are going to be able to charge for this house by the time it is that they can complete it. So it's not like these builders are real excited about going into adding inventory to the market, right? So this is like the case that we're now finding. If you go and you look down in the description, I've left a bunch of links to like the Federal Reserve charts for building permit issuance. And you can see that a lot of it is dropping and dropping dramatically. Now, if you really look at it, it's really kind of where we were at back in like 2018 or so. So, I mean, at least the level of issuance, but it's the trajectory, right? It's heading on a downward trajectory, which means that even less permit issuances are going to be taking place, which if the permits don't get issued, then they're not getting built. And so there's little inventory build, like, as far as like the increase in inventory coming from the new home builders isn't really going to be there. Now, one of the arguments that I heard is that these home builders aren't going to exactly stop, right? I mean, this is their job. This is what they're going to do. And if you think about it, they're just really going to cut back on a lot of maybe, cut back on some of their employees and some of their operations, but they're not going to go out of business completely. Well, that might be for like, D.R. Horton or Lennar or some of these other big time home builders like that. But the majority of homes that are built by small home builders, small time home builders, like with the less than like I left a link down in the description to it. And I know that's a little bit older information on the link that I had left, but it is still, I'm sure, very close to the case today, in which that 60% of homes are built by small time home builders, right? Not by the big time home builders. They're the ones who are the ones who make the biggest impact because they put the most homes together. An individual home builder has little impact on the entire market, but as a majority, most of the homes out there, or a good 60% of them, are built by these small time guys who can go out of business right now, right? So if it becomes very difficult to build a home and sell it, then the idea of speculation or spec homes getting out there or being built is not going to be really added to the market coming from the home builders, or at least the guys who know how to build them, right? And so this is something that I think about. I watch out there and see, like, who it is that gets excited about building homes, right? I know a guy who can build a home all in cash. Like, he has no bank involved. He buys the land, he gets the permits, he can pay for everything in cash right now all the time. And he does it. This is how he operates. And he said he's backed out. Like, he does not want to play this game right now, not knowing what it is that he's going to be able to sell this house for going into the future. So he says, man, I'm not building anything right now. In fact, he says, I'm selling out as many houses as I can get, and just keeping the prime rentals that he has. And that's his game right now. And I'm sure if he's doing that, then a lot of other people are doing that as well. So I think, okay, how is this going to add to the inventory? It's not, right? So the new home builders and the coming of inventory from new home building is going to diminish. Now, one of the things I noticed as I was trying to put this information together and really kind of think about like what ends up happening if you have a slowdown in building itself is that you have a slowdown in the entire economy, because you think about all those laborers who work for all that, all those guys who travel to a particular location in order to put this particular building together, all the money that they spend doing that. I remember when I worked construction, just about every single day we would eat out at a different restaurant, right? Sometimes we would bring lunches or, whatever, but a lot of times we were traveling to different locations and didn't really have the ability to necessarily bring a lunch with us every day. So it was more convenient just to eat out. And a lot of us did that every single day. Not to mention we were lazy and got paid a lot of money. So, between all that stuff, the economy, when you have building going on, really expands and does quite well, especially when it comes to like the restaurants and the hotels and, facilities like that, the bars. They do quite well when there's a lot of construction happening within these new areas. So when you see like new like urban development taking place within an area that hasn't really had it yet, you see like all of a sudden everybody starts becoming in the money. Well, think about it. If the permit issuance is falling and then there's less people who are putting homes together and there's less people spending all that money, then that starts dragging the economy down. And that happens on a broad spectrum across the entire country when you think about it, when you have conditions in which that we are experiencing today. So again, I think about it like, okay, so how is it that the housing market is going to react to this? Like, are prices going to go up or down because of the lack of new inventory that is coming into the market due to the new home builders? So a lot of people are like thinking, okay, so the housing market is going to crash real soon. And I think, okay, no problem. Let's think on this theory and let's find out the reasons. Right? Let's think of the reasons that there's going to be a housing market crash. And people said, okay, once the interest rates elevate, the prices will not be able to handle the position of being at an elevated price and being elevated in interest rates, the buyer just simply cannot be there, right? So that position won't work out for the housing market, and the housing prices will have to come down to meet the capabilities of the buyer at the high interest rates. So what occurred, right? Low inventory, houses still elevated in price, coming down in a lot of areas, but not necessarily, I mean, not in my opinion, not crashing, but definitely some markets, because there's a lot of markets out there, are coming down, some of them significantly, but for the most part, we're not experiencing a housing market crash yet, right? Prices have come down, but what's happening with the home sales that are taking place? They have depleted, right? There's very few homes being sold right now. So even though the interest rates are high, the amount of homes that are being sold at high interest rates have come down. So there's not a lot of homes in the market right now sitting on high interest rates. It's very like way less of them, right? Everybody refinanced when the interest rates had fallen. But as far as making new purchases with high interest rates, there's not a lot of them. And a good portion of those 70% or more are being purchased with buy down. So they're not even paying at a high interest rate. They're paying at an even lesser interest rate than what the mortgage rates are set at. All right, so now we have people who are buying homes in the market right now, not at a high interest rate, but at a buy down interest rate, which could backfire on them later on in the future. But as of right now, these things are being purchased with a lesser interest rate than what the high interest rate mortgages are being set at, right? And I'm kind of explaining that the best I can. And that's 2/3 of them. The other third are all cash buyers that can care less where interest rates are at, right? And now this is with the home sales that are taking place right now. So with the prices and the buyers and the people who are buying buy down loans, right, are willing to pay this price, including 1/3 of them being all cash buyers who can care less where the interest rates are at. So the interest rates and the impact that it was going to have on the market, or at least the housing market prices, has not hit the market in which that a lot of people thought that they were going to, right? I mean, this is just what's happening here. So as we experience more of the economic impact of what these high interest rates are doing to the market, it's not necessarily coming out to the way that a lot of people said it was going to, right? Now, let's think of another reasons that it's going to actually drop, because the high interest rates doesn't necessarily bring the prices down, although it still could if you give it time, right? But we haven't experienced it yet, right? Because 1/3 of them are going to all cash buyers who will pay this price, right? That's one way to just kind of look at it. So the other reasons that it'll start bringing more inventory to the market, or at least start bringing the housing prices down, is that people simply can't make the payment anymore, right? They're running out of money. They're going unemployed, whatever it is. They've lost their construction job, right? And they're going to not be able to make this payment anymore. So if that issue was to actually take place, how long does it actually take to start impacting the market? Like, the foreclosures that are going to start happening. It takes years. And if you have a wave of them come, then it takes maybe even longer for that to happen. Now, although we do have a rise in foreclosures, I should have probably put a link down in that. It's not going to a significant point that you can scream like, oh my gosh, look at all the foreclosures out there. This is going to cause a wave of, inventory onto the market at any time. That's not happening, right? So that part is not bringing the new inventory on the market like a lot of people would think it would when you have the idea of a recession coming, because the unemployment isn't necessarily rising in this time. Now, we are seeing a lot of job layoffs, but this is something that I kind of predicted, right? I said that the zombie corporations are going to get their heads knocked off, and people are going to have to go work at at the restaurants and go back to serving burgers and stuff. And that's really what we're starting to find take place out there, is that the jobs that are going, there is a lot of layoffs, but the unemployment, as far as people collecting unemployment insurance, is not necessarily rising, because there are so many jobs out there. It's still a tight jobs market. So even though it may be harder to make the payments, they're going to do whatever they need to make those payments. And that is to, bring on roommates or do whatever it is that they need to do, right? Now, I also thought about it. It's just okay, so let's think about it a different way. So if it doesn't come from foreclosures and the unemployment, right, and it doesn't necessarily come from the new home builders. So we got the new home builders are not necessarily wanting to build, and it's not necessarily coming from the foreclosures. I'm going to stop saying not necessarily. Okay. Let's go and think about it from another direction. Baby boomers dying off and like all these houses are just going to become available. This is another thing that I've heard a lot of people say, right? You know, it's just like all these baby boomers are gonna die off, and it's gonna leave just this abundant amount of homes out there available. Okay, no new inventory coming to the market, not necessarily coming from the foreclosures, but baby boomers are going to die and leave a bunch of houses. Maybe it'll be a combination, I don't know, but whatever. Baby boomers are going to die off, leaving these houses out there available to as far as inventory goes. I know personally a lot of people out there who have multi generations living in the house. Like there is, you know, an adult child living with their parents. And this is not new. This is a trend that is growing, right? So if these baby boomer die-offs leaving all these houses out there available, most likely it's going to go to somebody who's already living in the house. And if they're not going to somebody who's already living in the house, the person who's living in the house is going to still need a house. So it's the demand for that house will immediately be replaced by another person who purchases it, right? So if they don't get the house themselves, if it doesn't become available, it's not going to necessarily take away or add to inventory, as the person who does pick it up will just be immediately replaced by somebody who is now going to be in need of a home. So this is one of the things that I've been thinking about, is that a lot of homes out there have more than, you know, multi-generations living in them. I mean, that's what most homes are about, is like, you know, raising kids. And then, you know, back in the day, it used to be you raised your kids and then, you know, you had grandma living there when the old man passed away or something like that. And that's that was typical back in the day. So that's, you know, not too uncommon to have, like, you know, still occurring. So this is another thing that I thought about, is just like how much inventory could possibly come if these houses are already being occupied by somebody who is basically waiting for that, you know, for that elderly person to go ahead and pass away. So again, how is it that the inventory comes, right? I just can't seem to figure that one out when I think about all these three different ways that the inventory would typically be built within the economy, you know? Some people say, like, you know, maybe some like individual ideas, like, you know, Airbnb kind of crashing kind of things and stuff. And I thought, well, you know, yeah, I could see where, you know, like some of that might have some significant impact. But as far as a broad general, like actual changing the housing market, I don't know if that's necessarily would be the case. Like, I think it really comes down to like those three things when it comes to adding inventory. Is it either comes from the builders, you know, it comes from people just simply not being able to make it in foreclosures, or it comes from people dying off, right? But how else is new inventory going to come? It's not. It just, like, it has to come from being built. Now, again, like new home builds back in the day used to be a lot easier than they are today. I mean, when you built a home back in like the 80s, the permitting was a lot easier. In fact, it was so easy. I remember like talking to a guy who, I don't know, it was some county, I think it was across over in Washington, but he talked about when you went down and got a building permit, like it was so, like, you do like a little piece of paper, like what the house was gonna kind of look like, the square footage of it. It was so like nothing, almost no information at all, right? It was no big deal. And they gave you like a pamphlet, like, you know, a little guide. It was like, here, you know, follow these particular rules when you put your house together. You know, and of course, this is a long, long time ago, right? That this is the way it was. But when you think about it, it's just like everybody had to build their own house for themselves, right? I mean, it was like, it wasn't easy, but you didn't really have to have all that great of skills. Like carpentry skills are pretty, like, you know, I mean, it takes a lot to be a carpenter. You got to know what you're doing. But, you know, once you kind of learn some basic skills, like actually constructing a home really isn't that difficult. Like it's pretty easy to do, you know, once you kind of understand how it works, you know, and then once you kind of understand how saw and hammers and nails and screws, and then putting the pieces together, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, I get it, you know, and it just kind of all goes together. Well, it doesn't necessarily work like that today, right? I mean, when you go to build a house, it's a pretty complicated task. Buying the land, getting the permitting, getting the, you know, all the environmental testing, blah, 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 and I guess it goes on and on and on before you even start to build. Like before you even like do anything, you're going to be like hundreds of thousands of dollars into the process of building a home. And now what you're going to do is build a home on there that's like, say 900 square feet, maybe 1100 square feet, because you're going to try and build an affordable home. Does that make, like, you already spent $200,000 and you haven't even started building the home yet, right? Or I'm just kind of, maybe I'm not exaggerating. Maybe the land does cost that much. Who knows? But all I guess I'm getting at is that, when you go to build a house, you can't go and build like some cheap home. Unless, I mean, you could for yourself, I guess, if you already own the land, right? And then you wanted to do it for your own personal needs, you could probably build a fairly small home and consider it affordable and just, pay, and do it yourself. But if you're building one that's going to be sold, or you're building one for any kind of investment purpose, like you're going to try and get a loan for this thing and at some point, try and have it be worth more than what the loan is worth out there or something, you're not going to build like a cheap home. You're going to try and build a really nice, expensive home, one that's worth a lot of money. And that's the same thing with the builders. Like, they're not going to go and, buy this land, get this permitting, do all this other stuff, and then build a cheap home. They're going to build one that's going to sell for the most possible that they can get, because they need the biggest profit margin that they can possibly get. And that comes from building big and giant homes, not from building a lot of affordable homes. And so that's the case that, ends up being right now. Again, like, this is the housing market that I see taking place out there. And, it's not because, like, I think that, it should go up or down or sideways. It's just, what I see happening to what I see occurring. A lot of times, people want to compare 2008 to what we have going on today. And this isn't a fair comparison, because in 2008, there was a lot of toxic mortgages within the system. We can't compare these two. There was a lot of stuff that was happening there within the financial system that isn't occurring today. Right. And so it's just like, to say that it's going to be the same as that, that's not accurate, right? When we have mortgage-backed securities that were completely toxic back in the day, that means they were loaded with things that people were certainly not going to be paying back. Like, they had no capabilities of ever doing it. And so it was obvious, like, that's why a lot of people were able to call out the housing market back in the day. Now, I'm not trying to say that the housing market isn't going to crash, because, I mean, it very well could. And, nobody can predict the future, and things can get really, really bad. Now, one of the things that I noticed, if you go and you look at those charts of permit issuance, is that the permit issuance has pretty much gone down into every recession. Now, just because the permit issuance has dropped doesn't necessarily mean that it indicated a recession, but a recession was preceded with a drop in permit issuance every single time. Like, just go and look at it. Like, every single vertical gray bar on the permit issuance of newly privately issued permit issuance, new privately housing, I think is what it was called. Anyway, if you look at that one, just every single gray bar, just zoom in on it, and you're going to see that there was a drop in permit issuance preceding every single recession. And so we have a drop in permit issuance taking place right now. Everybody's screaming recession. If you think about it and you talk about it and you try to look for it, you will experience a recession. I'm sure that it is coming, right? I mean, it's only a matter of time. And so if this is taking place, then it almost guarantees that you're not going to see a whole lot of home building taking place during that time. And if there's not a lot of home building taking place during that time, and again, we're going to see that drain into the economy once again. Wow, I have gone 23 minutes straight. Isn't that amazing? All right. So what is it that it's already crashed? Well, it didn't crash in my area because my house is still worth more than what I paid for it. So until it's actually worth less than what I paid for it, and then maybe even go upside down, I mean, I don't know about a crash. I don't know anything about a crash. What's up, Simon? Caught you on Friday night. Hey, what's happening, Kevin? Thank you very much for tuning in. Alrighty, guys. So, let's see here. I'm going to be out here for maybe another 30 minutes or so. What do you think, or what reasons do we need to bring up and talk about that I didn't bring up already that we need to discuss? Simon has a Toyota pickup now. No, this is a Chevy S10, and it's the one I've been driving for quite a while. And I would love to get a Toyota. In fact, I've kind of come to the conclusion. I've come to the decision. There we go. I've come to the decision that sometime after the new year, I'm going to get a new vehicle. Like, I'm gonna, because I can afford it, right? I mean, I can afford a new vehicle. I have nice clothes. I have nice things. I'm trying to get nice things for the house and stuff. And I have these crappy old cars. So I'm going to treat myself to something nice that I really, other than the few little meager possessions and stuff that I really have, because really the only thing I have are tools and silver, guns. That's it. That's the only thing. And this has 10. Right. So, anyway, what do we want to talk? Let's discuss what it is that is going to drag the housing market down, or what it is you think is going to make it go up, or what it is that I failed to discuss or cover tonight. All right. Get a Tesla Model Y. Oh no, he's falling into luxury poverty on the way. Yeah, I don't think so. Like, I mean, because I've waited a long time, and actually, by the time I get there, I probably won't do it, right? Because that's the way I feel about everything. By the time I get there and I have it, it's like I don't even want it by that time anymore. And it's almost like I have to force myself to go and get things that are nice. Like, I will, I will just wear out anyway. Can you explain how Trump got so rich in real estate? Okay, so if you can, if you have enough friends, then what you can do is you go and you find apartments that are for sale, that are a really good price, that have good money cash flow to them, and you borrow money to buy those things, and you take a little piece of the profit, and you do it over and over and over and over again. And so if you have a lot of people who you can work with, who are willing to throw the money at it with you, then you can find these projects and find these, real estate deals, and pretty much borrow the money in order to buy the places, to get the cash flow, and you take a piece of it. Right? That's the simplest way to explain it. Good debt versus bad debt. My son does a great job of explaining good debt versus bad debt in one of our earlier videos. It was probably about 2 years ago. We did that video, and yeah, my son Freddie explains good debt versus bad debt. Okay. Are you a minimalist? I really kind of am. I mean, I don't mean to be, but like, I've I I don't really like. I don't know. It could be just mental, like, left over from just being in, like, survival mode or something like that. But no, really, like, I don't look at possessions as something like I desire. Like, I like driving a new car, but only for a little bit. Like, I rented a car to take my son and a bunch of kids up to Portland to go to Sky Zone and go up to the trampoline park, right? And I rented this car, and it was just like, cool. It was nice, right? At first, I'm like, oh, cool. Look at this, man. It has this surround, like, you back the car up, and all of a sudden, the screen pops open, and you can see, like, all the way around the entire car. And I'm thinking, man, there's a lot of cameras on this thing, and this is really fancy, and this is a lot of fun. And it was really powerful, and it was cool, and it was clean, and everything. And then after about 3 days, because I had it for 3 days, I was done. Like, I didn't really care about the car anymore. It wasn't about the money or anything else. It was just like, I was over it. Like, it wasn't that cool for me. It was nice for, like, literally a minute. I don't really get into possessions. I like experiences. Like, I like a good view. I like sound, I like music, and I like food. And that's what I like. Like, I don't know how else to, like, if I would spend all my money on traveling and eating. Alright. Are about inflated house prices. I think, like, honestly, I think house prices are gonna have a blow off top, right? I mean, if you don't have new inventory coming in, right? And it's not, and like, the higher interest rates don't drive it down because it's cash buyers who are going in. This is like, the housing market is really only going to, like, the rich, right? And that's sad to say, but it's the separation between the rich and the poor. It's the Cantillon effect. And if it's like, would you think about it? It's like history, right? I mean, it's going to take place. It's going to be ever increasingly more difficult to do the things that would typically have seemed like very normal for most people, because we are growing into this ever increasingly wedge between the two, right? That's why it's like important for, I was thinking about this, and I was kind of like trying to figure out a way to explain it, like, because I was thinking about this whole wedge thing, right? Being on one side of the wedge or the other. And it's not a matter of being rich, so rich that you're on one side of the wedge, or that you can make money, so much money that it's like beyond the people, like beyond the amount of money that the people around you are making. It's not like that. It's the way you position yourself in life so that the need for money, or the need to try and acquire money, is very low, right? Because you have like so much investments that it just comes in from every direction, or you have businesses that have it coming in from every direction. You have like, the ability to generate revenue very quickly. This is like being on one side of the wedge. Or you just have a way in your life in which that the amount of money that you have coming in is it doesn't need that much, right? You have very low living expenses whatsoever, and your cash flow that you have coming in is more than adequate, right? And you can able to maintain that, or be able to save and acquire more. When you put those things towards other parts of life that can still generate even more for you, right? Doing, passive or perpetual, or things that are going to be, generating revenue for you while you sleep. If you have that kind of mindset, that's the kind of things that you're going to be on the right side of the wedge, even if you earn a lot of money. Like, you might be able to just like go out there and just bust ass doing your job or whatever, and just really work it and make a lot of money. But you have to continuously do that. And if you just dump all that money into the bar, right, then it doesn't matter how hard or how much money you can work. You're on the bottom side of the wedge, because you're not doing something that is going to keep you in that perpetual motion of having like revenue coming into you, with the businesses and investments and stuff like that. So it isn't a matter of being filthy rich or something like that. It's just a matter of being in a position in which that your life and the condition that you have placed it in is adequate to the amount of revenue that you have coming in, and not just adequate, but that the revenue that you do have coming in, or the income or pay or whatever, is beyond what it is that you have for your standard of living. It's one of the reasons why I drive cheap cars, right? I mean, at any given time, I can get rid of a car and I would still have two cars, and my car expense is very low. People say, well, you got to pay all these registrations and all this insurance and all this taxes and stuff. First of all, we don't have taxes in Oregon. Registration is really cheap in Oregon, and insurance on secondary cars is really cheap. So no, I don't pay a lot. My cars are very, like, the initial cost of my cars have been made up. Like, I don't mean to brag about this, but the two videos that I've done that are like some of the most popular videos that I've done on this channel have earned enough in revenue to not only buy the Toyota, but it also paid for the pickup truck as well. And it's about ready to pay for the Explorer. So like, those two videos have pretty much paid for all my vehicles, right? I mean, that's kind of crazy to think about. And so no, I mean, I don't think I would fall into like luxury. Like, I would probably be very cautious on when it is that I would make a purchase of a vehicle like that. But I would like to drive around in something cool. Like, it would be fun to have. But again, I'd probably get over it within, a week. Let's go find, hey, did I see somebody saying D's nuts or something? D's nuts. I don't know if she's in here right now. I met her in Vegas, and she is very cool. It was very cool to meet her. Limitless investing. Thank you for the $10, man. Very cool. There we go. Another $10. Thank you very much. Do you see used car prices going up in the next 5 years? Well, that's something interesting to think about, because I think a lot of people got quite excited about their vehicle purchases during the whole stimulus packages being handed out to everybody. And of course, there was also a very limited amount of vehicles being produced at the time, which, put a big, drain on the amount of vehicles, or the amount of inventory that was available for cars out there. So as far as used car prices, I do feel that used car prices are going to come down if we start experiencing more of the layoffs and people having to reduce their or reduce their living expenses due to their income dropping, right? So if their income falls, they might have to get out of this expensive car and get into a cheaper vehicle. Um, Not to talk other people's business or anything like that, but recently I know somebody who had a fairly new vehicle that they sold outright to actually take the little bit of like profit that or just a little bit of money that they could get from it, and got into a lease, right? So that they could like sell off their car, get the cash for it because they wanted the cash, and started leasing a vehicle. And so I'm thinking that was, if this is the type of move that some people are making out there, I could see where like used prices of vehicles in that sense, like especially the lower income ones, could actually start being in higher demand as people start moving out of those expensive vehicles that they had purchased and try getting into the used cars because the used car market was depleted. All right, so I could see it going that way or something like it. But most likely, if it really starts coming into like liquidity issues, like if I'm thinking like, if it's really difficult, like right now, who knows what's going to happen. But if we do start running into some of the liquidity issues, like I think is going to start taking place here at the beginning of the year, or at the end of this year, or the beginning of next year, if we really start running into something like that, then I could see where people would just start selling off whatever. Like even if my hours got cut back, I would probably sell a car first, right? I would sell one of my used cars. And because I got them at a decent price at a decent time, I might be even try to push it a little bit and get a higher price for them. So, um, I got, $500 for the Toyota. Who knows? If I could sell for $800, I think that would be pretty cool. Anyway. Uh, Drew, thank you very much for the $2. Bought my home super cheap at a 15-year 2.12. See, like that's another thing. Like his house, like your house, you're probably not going to put that out there for sale right now, considering you're at a 2% interest rate. I mean, that's awesome. Like, who would give that up, right? Hey, all nighter. See, I'm commuting. Will comment soon. All right, man. Drew again. Thank you again for the $2. My daily driver got totaled, but I have another one. See, that's the other thing that I feel good about too. Is just like my wife has a vehicle that's fairly new that she drives around. So we do have like it's not just like I'm dependent on crappy vehicles. I mean, my wife does have a fairly new vehicle. It's not nothing nice. It's just a, Ford Escape, but whatever. It's enough to, zip us to Portland without any worries and stuff. But yeah, I mean, if I, wrecked a car or anything happened or whatever, I wouldn't stress it at all. All right. Hey, Simon, happy to see you are making the move into a new car. You deserve it, man. Speaking on housing, a video on the Fed page details a slow pullback over the next 5 years. Are they lying? Speaking on housing, a video on the Fed page details a slow pullback over the next 5 years. Are they lying? I'm not sure. I'd have to look at that information that you're talking about and give it some thought. Hey, there she is, DZ Nuts. Oh, let's laugh or laugh out loud. I'm here, right on. It's good to see you. Yeah, very fun. That's what I love about like the Silver Symposium and those type of conferences, is that you like. I mean, for me, like I had never really experienced them outside of like being there, like as a YouTube celebrity or whatever, because I never really considered myself a celebrity. I don't even like consider myself a celebrity now. I mean, I find that kind of even hard to like even say. It makes me like feel weird. But when people come up and say like hey, I've been following you, I love the channel, tell all my friends or whatever, and it's really exciting to meet you, like that like moment for me is like really cool. Like I always enjoy it. I was at the restaurant the other day and a guy was on his way out and was just like, hey man, I don't mean to bother you, but I love the channel, have a great meal, whatever, and he stepped out. Like those little tiny events like that, I absolutely love them. I think that that is great. And to be able to meet the fans at those conferences and, just kind of have discussions on some of the things that they are experiencing, the things that they are doing in their lives. It's a lot of fun. Like it's an energy that you don't experience anywhere else. So those conferences are really worth going to. I mean, I would encourage people to go to every one of them they can. Right on. There's some more super chats here. Hey, Infamous NYC, thank you so much for the $10. Bought a 2023 Tacoma real axle has leak, bearings need replaced along with the brake shoes, under warranty, but bill would be $650. $500 car is the way. Car has 20,000 miles. It built during pandemic. Oh, yeah, no shit. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I always kind of wondered about vehicles that got built during questionable times, like, during the great financial crisis, the '08 time when the great layoffs or whatever was happening, or even during the pandemic when they were shutting down production, or these vehicles were getting difficult to build, or they sat and waited for parts to arrive before they could be completed. It does make me wonder how good of vehicles those really are. But yeah, I don't know, like getting into a new vehicle, it's nice. Like I don't really even want to drive it for work. Like I just really want to drive it for weekends. Like, literally just like a weekend car to cruise around in. I don't even know why I would want it. Like that's the thing. By the time I get there, I probably won't buy it because I would be like, what am I going to do with this thing? Except for driving on the weekends, which would be a lot of fun. But anyway. Infamous NYC, another $5. Thank you so much. Dealer said that the short mechanics that can do the job glad you got $500 car, can ditch it instead of wondering when your car is going to get fixed. Yeah. They said there's short mechanics that can do the job. I get it, Glad. Okay. Yeah, me too. And that's the thing I like about having the cheap cars or having multiple cars is that I really like I still haven't looked at the Explorer yet. I just haven't even it's because it's like my concern level of it is so low, right? I mean, it's just like I just need to jump it and it would be fine. But during the time to like the last few days, it's kind of been nicer and I was thinking I might bring some lumber home, but what is this? Drew, thank you for the $2 here. No student loan debt either with the GI Bill. Yeah. All right. Limitless investing, $10. Thank you so much. Do you think low lumber prices will make builders push low income home building before interest rates go up again? Does lumber prices really impact building? I do think that lumber prices do impact building, but I don't think it impacts it enough that the adjustment to lumber prices within itself is going to have a dramatic price reduction within homes, right? Although it is a lot, it's like I forget how much like the lumber prices were actually contributing to the home prices after the great run up. But that was a pretty dramatic rise. I mean, lumber prices went from 400 per thousand up to like 1,700 per thousand, and that's huge. That's a huge amount, to even try and conceptualize as far as like what that would do to the entire lumber market if it was to stay there. 1,700 per thousand, like this is what it would do. It would take lumber like a 2x4 standard and better. If it was trading at 400 per thousand, your retail price would be somewhere around say $3.75 to $4.25, right? That would be like probably pretty typical if you had lumber prices sitting around 400 per thousand. Now, when it ran up to 1,700 per thousand, that same $4 2x4 standing and better 8 foot long would be selling for around $13.50, right? Now, if you think about a 2x4 stud in the wall, right? Now, these things are every 16 inches. When we do lumber takeoffs, like a lumber takeoff is when you take a blueprint and you figure out all the material that you need, for a particular project. So when you do lumber takeoffs and you count out the lineal footage of wall that you are going to be building out of 2x4s, you take that lineal footage and you consider one stud per lineal foot. Even though you might space them out 16 inches, you consider one stud per foot, and then that gives you the ability to build corners and do, trimmer studs or whatever it is that you need to do in order to build the wall and put the windows and doors and stuff like that in. So if you can think about that, every single foot had a $13.50 stud. Then it has a top plate, a bottom plate, or it has two top plates and a bottom plate, right? So the top plates is another 2x4 that connects the studs together, right? So you got this 2x4, it's really long. This is what the length of the wall would be. Has a 2x4 sitting on top of it. That's considered the plate. You got another 2x4 sitting on it that ties it all together, or the walls together. And then you got your next story floor joists, or maybe your trusses that sit on top of that, right? So you got about another 6 feet of 2x4, or even just like say another 8-foot piece, right? So there's $27 every single lineal foot of framing that was, when prices were at $1,700 per thousand. That is an insane amount, right? Like absolutely insane. Now you take that down to the $4, right? You got two studs, $8, top $12. It's half the price, not even half the price now, right? So when you think about like how much framing goes into a house, there's quite a bit of it, but the overall prices have moved up dramatically in everything else, like labor cost, permitting cost, land cost, all the window, doors, trim, stuff like that. A lot of that stuff is starting to come down, like as far as the trim and lead times, which is adding cost to a house. Lead times have come back quite a bit, as far as like the amount of time it takes from the time you order doors and windows to the time you receive them. That's coming down dramatically. We're finding windows sometimes, like I shouldn't like necessarily say that. I've seen window lead times drop, but then recently, like I've seen them kind of actually stretch back out there again. So it fluctuates quite a bit that I'm finding within the window. So I'm guessing this is like, trying to adjust to market demands, or just trying to adjust to the flow of their manufacturing that they can do. But the window lead times seem to be kind of fluctuations. Door lead times are fairly quick. Like I don't have any problems getting doors. For those of you who don't know, I work at a lumber yard and I do retail sales for a living. I've been doing it for my entire life. And then like some of the things like sidings, like that's another thing. Siding prices, there's new products out, right? New fiber cement siding that has a new name coming out. So it's a cheaper product than what we were selling prior to, well, I guess prior to now, but when the pandemic kicked in and the prices of this fiber cement ran up to incredibly high prices, a new product came in to bring in a more competitive product. And it's the exact same product. There's no difference in it, right? But it has a new name and it has a different look to it. So these things are starting to take place within the market too. So that's going to actually bring some price relief to the overall building of a home. But as far as like any kind of like real significant return to what it was prior to the pandemic, as far as the prices that it takes to build a home, those things are still pretty much elevated. There is some stuff that has been relieved. Lumber prices have come down, but everything else is still quite expensive, And so I don't really see how it is that like the construction of a new home is getting to get any cheaper. Right? Not from here, not from anything that I see. Lumber prices could come down further, but again, like we've already seen, like some of the price relief that I believe is already going to occur has occurred in a lot of, the stuff that they're seeing now. If it continues for a while, like it gets like really pressured in there, well, you're going to see like if more houses fail to get produced, right? Then this is something that like I don't know like if everybody kind of sees it this way, but the amount of population continues to grow, right? I mean, it may not be in a case here in the United States that it needs to, sustain whatever the future generations, all that other stuff that people talk about. The fact is that there's people born every day who want a house, who want a home, right? And now the population here in the United States of people who are looking to buy a home or who would love to have a home, who don't have a home, is growing, right? Now, whether or not they're choosing to actively pursue to purchase a home, just the desire is out there, right? And more people are out there with this either giving up that they don't want a home only because they just don't think it's capable, but the idea that they would love to be in a home is probably there, right? And that's growing. So if you're not producing ever increasing amounts of homes out there, then there's going to be a gap in production, right? And that's what we're experiencing right now. So as the home depletion, or like how do I say this? As the amount of homes starts deplete, right? The demand for people who would actually love to have a house continues to grow, right? Even though there's less houses being built, it's not like there's less people who are like, not out there dreaming that one day they would like to be in a home, right? I mean, that's kind of how I see it anyway. And so like as we continue on into the future, where is it that that inventory is going to come from? That's my biggest question that I have. See, prior to the 2008 financial crisis, we had a huge run up in home building. There was a lot of people who were building homes right before the great financial crisis kicked in. We don't have that overwhelming building taking place right now, or didn't have it to begin with. Hey, Osama Abdu. Thank you very much for the $2. Been in and out. What car are you about to buy? I'm not, well, at the time, I'm going to choose. I will figure it out then. But most likely, like I've kind of had my dream on this Camaro, right? And here's the thing about manifesting things into your realities, right? Like I thought about it the other day. I was joking around because I try to get I'm like the jokester at work. I'm literally like a SpongeBob. Like I hate to admit that sometimes, but I am. I'm like SpongeBob at work. I'm always joking. I'm always like, trying to get people to laugh. I'm always the clown or the character or whatever. Because I try to make work fun. But I was talking to one of the guys there, and I was just like, man, manifesting stuff into your realities. It's really all about the meanings and the things that you give it and stuff. And we were joking around, and like, I don't know, half an hour later, one of the other coworkers there had gone out to lunch with her son, and I don't know, she got a sandwich, and it was like she just wasn't really feeling that well, and she gave me her sandwich, right? And I'm like, oh, look at this. I manifested a sandwich into my reality. And we were joking around about how it is that this sandwich came into my existence. Now, I said I was hungry just a few minutes earlier, and then all of a sudden the sandwich is there. And I thought to myself, I could have asked her to pick me up a sandwich too. And I could have paid her for the sandwich, and I could have just made this thing happen. But it just landed here, right? And it just happened to be mine because I guess probably my desk was the first one that she passed by when she was on her way back to her desk. And so I'm thinking, yeah, I could have had this sandwich for myself, but it landed here. I can have that Camaro. Like, I can have that Camaro just as easily as I could have had this sandwich, right? Now, of course, somebody else handed me the sandwich. But then again, I'm sitting in a position in which that I do have the money that I could go and finance for a new Camaro. Like, it wouldn't be a problem. I can make that happen. I have the capabilities. Like, I've manifested the capabilities to do it. I've already done it. It's there. I just don't do it, right? I mean, literally, I just don't do it. It's already happened. Like, the car already exists. I have it, but I just haven't gone down and gotten it. Maybe I will after the new year, See, there was a time in my life I couldn't have done it, but now I can. So I've already done it. Like I've already manifested the car into my reality. I just haven't literally gone down and picked it up. I mean, I can do it at any time I want. These nuts. Thank you so much for the $10. That's really cool of you. You're so nice. All right. Did I get every? Oh, here we go. Isaac at War. Thank you for the $5. Not taking demand into account, if normal lumber prices won't make home prices drop, what will? I find it hard to believe builders have small margins. There's not there. Okay, well, you're gonna have to pay the laborers less, which isn't gonna really happen, right? I mean, it's already like in my area, it's already hard to find a laborer because they all left because there's no place to live. So everybody who lives here has to pay a high rent, and if you're going to pay high rent, then you got to make a higher wage. So you got to either pay the laborers less, not going to happen. You got a permitting issue, right? Permits are expensive, land costs are expensive. I don't know how you're going to drop those prices. Building prices seem to be elevated or as far as building supply prices go. So there's really nothing out there that is going to be able to bring in a lesser house price. Right? So you think about the home builder's margin. I know a lot of home builders out there. There's not a lot of margin. That's the reason why homes are expensive, because that's where the profit margin is. You don't want to work hard so that you can just make an average living, right? I mean, why do like if you can bust your butt, right, building really cheap homes for people, but it might be the equivalent of like working sales at a lumber yard. Like if that's the equivalent of it, why would you try that hard? If you could build a house that has a really high profit margin to it because it's really expensive, then why wouldn't you do that? Right? Because that's the one that sells. The other one is difficult. You work really hard to make it happen. You barely make a living. The other one, you work really hard and you make a lot of money at it, or you can at least make a decent living at it. It's just the way it is. If it worked in the game of numbers, like you could build a vast amount of really cheap houses and sell them off very quickly. Like you can knock them out in 6 weeks, takes no time to knock it out. The land prices were really cheap. The building prices are cheap. The labor prices were cheap. The permitting prices were cheap. Everything was cheap. The taxes were cheap. Everything was cheap, right? Then they would build cheap homes, but things aren't cheap. I mean, you think about it. If the land price and the permitting and the, everything it takes, the engineering of the land or something like that. Like if you're in my area, it's in Astoria, you're on the hill, you have to have engineering done to make sure that you're building a house that isn't going to slide off the hill. You have all this stuff that you need to do, then what kind of house can you possibly build? You have to build an expensive one that's going to sell for a decent amount to make up for all this other stuff that you have to do. Thank you guys. Thank you everybody for the super chats. That's really cool of you. It's like I love the fact that you're willing to so much to support the channel, and it feels good to be out here doing this. I said that I was only going to come out here for an hour, and we're about ready to hit that hour. But I got 325 of you with 152 likes and $68 in super chats, and I just I feel like we're on a roll here. All right, home equity will get depleted. People get a cheap rate but paid over asking price and will have to be ready to see their houses not worth what it was 2 years ago. Let's hope fear wins. Okay, vision 1. Give me the reason why the house prices are going to come down. I'm not trying to deny it. And I mean, that's fine. They've already come down quite a bit. But what I'm saying is like the price that I paid for my house and what the ZELLE estimate, which I know is not necessarily exactly accurate, but considering what it once was, which was like incredibly inaccurate, I mean, it had just gone on completely off the charts. I mean, put it this way, I bought the house, and after that, the ZELLE estimate of my house started going up so fast that between my wife's job, my day job, and YouTube, I could not earn as much money as the house price was moving up on the ZELLE, estimate of the house. It was ridiculous. It was like just a stupid amount. So a lot of that came out. Like it was a significant portion of that increase has come out of the price on the ZELLE estimate. but it's still like significantly higher than what I had paid for the house 2 years ago, like significantly higher. So it would have to drop like a dramatic amount to even get close to what it is that I had paid, and then even more to get down to what I owe, right, on the house to before it puts me underwater. Now, a lot of people are in that position because we've already talked about this. It's like the amount of people who have tried or who have purchased a home in the last year is very small. There's not been a lot of home sales taking place. Of those home sales, the people who are getting those loans, like 70% or more are getting them with buy downs, so they're not even paying the high interest rate. And on top of that, a third of these homes that are being sold are going to all cash buyers. Again, I think about it, like, where is this, fall in the home prices going to come from when this is the situation that is taking place right now? I mean, a third of cash buyers, excuse me, are in the market right now, keeping the prices where they are. Home prices, as far as the replacement of a new home, to build a new home, have not come down significantly. So to even build a new home right now is quite expensive, very much like what the prices are reflecting. Right. So again, I think, like, what is it that is going to bring these home prices down? The builders aren't interested, and people aren't interested in building into the idea that home prices are coming down. So they're not very excited. You can see that with the home builder sentiment. And then on top of that, you got the people who are pretty much at low interest rates that they had locked in when, prior to the rise in mortgage rates. Those people aren't interested in selling. They're not going to come out and provide lower prices for the market. They're not interested in selling their house at all. Right. So again, who's going to be selling cheap homes? Who wants to sell? Who's motivated to sell? People who are getting foreclosed on. Those are the people who are motivated to sell. Divorce, death, and destitution, right? So if you have a bunch of deaths, right, which we talked about, like the baby boomer, the elderly population, as they start to grow old and pass away, right, that property's got to go somewhere, and you would think it would go out to inventory. But the amount of people who are living with their parents, the amount of adult children who live, or amount of multi-generations who live within a home is quite prevalent within the market right now. So these homes aren't necessarily going to come out there for inventory coming from the baby boomers, right, or from a dying off of the population or something like that. Again, like, I don't see it. Like, to me, if the home builders aren't excited and you do not have people out there actively trying to build homes to add to inventory, then what you're going to see is a gap in production and the price of homes go up. Right? I mean, soon as the idea that the Federal Reserve is going to change their position on interest rate policies, and the people believe that they are going to be lowering interest rates going into the future, they will be buying houses thinking that they will be able to refinance into the future, and that will motivate them to support the mortgage market. So, I mean, support the housing market. I mean, if there's any kind of, like, even real pressure to it, I mean, to the market, they could just put out that narrative and add support, not even do anything at all. All right, the credible threat theory. All right, man, it's been so much fun hanging out here with you guys. Okay, limitless living. Did I get that wrong the first time? Did I say investing the first time or something? All right, limitless living. Thank you so much for the $10, man. What would be the best advice for someone who wants to buy a home but makes $50K a year? Do you think they should buy a home or get rent low apartment till he saves and figures out the next move? Okay, if you are by yourself, this is my advice, right? Is to not wait to buy a property, is to get a property as soon as possible, but to do some kind of house hacking event if you can, right? To be able to buy the property and rent it out. Like, if it has an apartment on there, if you could park an RV and live in the RV kind of thing, I don't know, whatever it is that you can do. I mean, I don't live in a tent in the backyard or something, right? But be able to acquire the property and rent it out or figure out some way to do that, roommates, whatever, do that, right? $50,000 a year is not enough that you can do it on your own. Well, I certainly couldn't do it. I mean, not in my area. I can barely make it as it is with everything I got going on, right? So that's the way that I would do it. And I would follow people like Lumberjack Landlord and Mike Zuber. Those guys, they talk a lot about this type of thing. I'm not somebody who's a real estate guy. Like I don't do investments at all, really. Um, but if that was you and I was single, that's definitely what I would do. I mean, absolutely. I would sleep in my car, right, and rent out the house or something like that. And just do it until you can figure it out, until you can figure out how it is that you can get yourself in there. But if you can figure that way, is to buy a house, rent out the rooms, live in your car, and own the home. And because the home is going to be worth a lot more than what a lot of people are saying out there, at least in my opinion, because I don't think there's going to be a housing market crash if you don't have the home builders being actively building homes, right? That's what I think it would take, is for them to be active and then providing more inventory to the market. So I mean, and that's my opinion on the whole matter. I don't think that that's something that's going to rapidly change. All right, get down here to the bottom. All right. Thank you very much. The Woke Police for the $10. Here is 10 more. Well, thank you so much. That's very cool of you. Got a bunch of you up in here. 349 viewers, 184 likes. Hit the like button. We'll see if we can get some more people up in here. If you hit the like button, what YouTube algorithm will do is it'll recognize that there's more engagements taking place, more comments, more likes, especially the super chats. That definitely does it. But the YouTube algorithm wants to, have videos that are being actively engaged with. So what'll happen is that it'll take the video and it'll start spreading it out there for more people to try and join in and watch. All right. So what else do we need to talk about? What part of the housing market is going to do what? Like, what is it that we need to discuss? Because I think I've thought about a lot of different angles on what could happen. I mean, especially when it came to like interest rates. I didn't think the rise of interest rates were necessarily going to drive the housing market down like a lot of people said it was going to. And it wasn't because I thought that the high interest rates weren't going to have an impact to the buyer. I knew that was going to happen. What I believed is that the interest rates could only go so far before the investment market starts to step in, adding support to the mortgage-backed security, saying, hey, that yield is where I want to be. And so once that investment portion starts to come in, then even though the Fed is trying to push rates higher, it doesn't necessarily mean that the mortgage rates are going to continue to go up, as the investment community might step in and say, man, that mortgage-backed security price is where I'm at. Now, of course, we're starting to see mortgage rates rise a little bit, and the investment community is concerned about higher rates coming into the future, and you can see that within the U.S. Treasuries. But I did think about that. It was just like, man, just because the Fed raises rates doesn't necessarily that the mortgage rates are going to experience the same thing. And actually, that is what happened, because when the Fed started raising rates, mortgage rates shot up right away. Damn it. Hold on one second. Oh, yeah, no problem. All right. Mortgage rates shot up right away, right? But then they kind of plateaued off, and they didn't really necessarily follow the Fed funds rates rising. It just kind of shot up real quick and then maintained that until just recently, and they've come up a little bit more. But again, they kind of act on their own, away from necessarily the Federal Reserve and what it is that they are doing. The Fed is getting out of the mortgage-backed security market, leaving like a pool of mortgage-backed securities out there. But when you don't have a lot of sales taking place, especially mortgages being written or refinanced, then the pool of mortgage-backed securities begins to diminish, right? Which is where the investment side of things can come in and say, hey, that price that it's fallen to, that's it. That's where I'm at. Now, if this pool was really huge, the price would fall dramatically, but the pool is shrinking, right? Even though the Fed is unloading their mortgage-backed securities, the mortgages that are being written and refinanced are falling, right? And so that shrinks that pool of mortgage-backed securities out there. And if it shrinks the amount of pool of back, oh, good Lord, if it shrinks the pool of mortgage-backed securities, then the amount of them that the investment community can buy begins to diminish as well. Then that begins to diminish as well. And that's where the support for the interest rates within the mortgages start to occur. And that's one of the reasons why it shot up and plateaued off as the Fed continues, because the investment community was really adding the support to the mortgage-backed securities, or preventing it from going any higher, the interest rates, right? Because the prices fell, and that was their ticket. Cool, we got a bunch of likes. Thank you. All right. Thanks, the woke. You snuck by me. Thanks, all nighter for reaching out like that. All right. It makes lots of sense to rent now. It seems way lower than mortgage. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I have no problem with the idea of renting. A lot of people have issues with renting. They say you're throwing your money away and stuff like that. And I agree, it's throwing your money away. But all like all the rich people that I have ever met, right? Their debt pays them, right? They don't pay their debt. They pay their debt that they have, that all of it pays them, right? So when they sign I promise to pay you guys back whatever it is that they're using that money for is paying them more than what that interest that they are paying on that debt. So everybody that I know who has debt, it pays them. Other than that, everybody is 100% into assets and zero liabilities, right? They have no liabilities other than those good debts, right? The ones that they had taken on, those are liabilities, but it's an asset because it pays them. So that's really what they're in, is an asset. 100% assets, zero liabilities. Now, when you rent, you are not taking on any kind of liability. You're also not taking on an asset. Now, your liability is 30 days, right? You got 30 days and then that's it, right? After that, you have no liability anymore, right? You don't have to pay the rent. You're going to get kicked out, but you don't have to pay the rent, and your life doesn't come to an end. There's nobody who comes after you. You don't necessarily ruin your credit, right? Unless you don't pay and you get evicted or something like that. But if everything's cool, right, and at the end of it, you're like, hey, I'm done. I don't need this apartment no more, and you're done paying rent, you are in 100% assets. You are incredibly nimble. You can do whatever you want. You can go wherever you need to. You can make the money however you choose to, right? And you don't have a 30-year promise to pay out there, right? Which is now a liability. See, I have a liability for 30 years. I have to pay for the next 30 years guaranteed. Now, whether or not I got a good deal on my house and it's worth it, and the rent and all that, and you compare it, and then you can have this asset at the end of it. Okay, all that stuff you can say, whatever, right? But at the end of the day, if you have been renting, you are in 100% assets and zero liabilities. Now, you have to take on the position of acquiring assets, and lots of them, right? Because you can be making a house payment, and even with the low interest rate, you are still going to be paying a hell of a lot more for that house than you would have if you paid cash. But if you are nimble and you can go where the money is, and you can rent here and rent there or whatever, and just be out and be 100% in assets, by the end of it, you can outright buy a house. Just outright buy it. Now, granted, I get to live in my house the entire time, but if you're renting, you can rent nice places. You can rent in nicer places. If you don't like the place you're in, you go find some other place to be, right? And that's something that is pretty nice if you don't happen to like the house. What if a bad neighbor moves in? What if the neighborhood turns to crap? What if you lose your job in that neighborhood or in that area, and you find a job long ways away? Now you're commuting, right? These things are not very nimble by buying a house. So I'm cool with the idea of renting, right? But you have to acquire assets while you're doing it, and massively, use that position to acquire assets. Right. Oh, man, so much fun here. Okay, I'll give it another 15 minutes, seeing as how I already am 15 minutes past what I said I was going to do. Nate B, thank you very much for the $5. My WeWork office in New York is now closing 50% of the spaces. 50% of space. First sign of weakness from them since pandemic. It's starting on commercial real estate. Yeah, well, you can see that really, to me, it was the manufacturing in China slowing down dramatically. When I saw the manufacturing in China slowing down, I knew that there was going to soon be issues with freight, right? Freight and trucking and all that other stuff. We will soon see issues with the warehouse. Like we already started to a little bit, but we're going to see bigger with warehouses going empty and not being restocked, right? So all of a sudden there's going to be like this, all these warehouses with nobody renting them or nobody needing the spaces for them because everybody built up with this just-in-time delivery that's got severed, and they're like, man, we need to be closer to home. We need to have more onshoring. We need to have, a supply on hand or whatever. But once just-in-time availability comes back, it's by far the most efficient, cheapest, easiest way to profit, right? Than it is to store and pay cost of securing and interest and all the other stuff that comes, the expenses that come from having an inventory, as opposed to ordering it, showing up, and then using it or selling it right away. That's the just-in-time delivery is by far the most cheapest, efficient way of going and most profitable way of doing it. So it's going to kill the warehouse part of things, right? All this stocking or mass stocking of warehouses, it's going to be horrible for those who invested in that fashion. But that's where I could see it first. Like you see it in the manufacturing in China, then you see it in shipping, you're going to see it in the warehouses, and then pretty soon, like we're already seeing mass of it, but we're going to see an incredible amount of it when it comes to retail. Because literally, if there is nothing being built and manufactured in China, then what it is that you're going to sell? Nothing. There's nothing to sell because it never got built, right? So that's what we're going to end up finding as far as the next, kind of wave of things, is that it's going to eventually hit the retail side of things, and people are going to really be freaking out going, where the hell is all this stuff? And that's when you're going to start seeing real inflation start to kick in, because the last inflation we saw really came from a severing of the supply chain, saying, hey, you can't get your stuff, and if you can't get it, it feels like it didn't get manufactured, but it was manufactured. It was just sitting out there in a container on a ship somewhere in the middle of like the ocean outside of LA or whatever, but it wasn't getting to the shelf, right? But that didn't mean that there was a shortage. Even though people felt the shortage, it was a severing of the distribution network, right? The stuff was built, it just didn't get to you. Well, now the stuff's not being built, right? See, eventually the warehouses are filled and all this other stuff, and prices of TV are getting a lot cheaper, and all that other stuff that was manufactured that got ordered during the pandemic that nobody really wanted, all that stuff is getting cheap, right? And you're going to find that the orders going to China are going to continue to diminish as this stuff, that cheap stuff that had filled the warehouses, has to be run, has to be purchased and sold, or sold to purchase whatever, eventually deplete the inventory before new orders can get to China or get to the world. I shouldn't say China, but China is the bigger manufacturer, right? I guess Mexico is going to be the bigger manufacturer now, right? So before the orders start going to Mexico, right? But that's ultimately what's going to end up taking place, is that there's going to be a huge depletion in the amount of manufactured goods out there. And when it comes to being a consumer-based economy like we are, if we don't have goods to sell, then how are we going to have a job? Like that's how we have a job. That's how, like, a lot of people, is that we bring in foreign production and then we sell it to each other. And if you're not part of that game, this is part of the Cantillon effect, right? I mean, you think about it, think about what Cantillon was saying, that at the end of this, the only people that the new money is advantageous for, or the new money coming in, is for those who have first access to the money, those who are working for the people who have first access to the money, the people who are bringing in the foreign production, and the foreign producers themselves. Everybody else suffers in poverty, right? So if you're part of that game of bringing in the foreign production and selling that foreign production, then you're part of the new money that's coming in. But if that new production doesn't come to the United States, then you don't have anything to sell, then that's it, you're out of it, right? And that's what a lot of the United States is the purchasing and selling of foreign production to one another. It's kind of scary to think about, really. Wow, man, so many comments. Thank you guys. All right, Limitless Living. Thank you so much for the $10. You're really loading me up tonight. Dollars went up in my country, in Cuba, 25% in a month. Why is gold hitting 2000, almost all-time highs? If dollar goes up, why is gold going up? Does not high dollars counter gold prices to go down? Very good question. Yes. This is where Brent Johnson really should be answering this question, because really this has a lot to do with the dollar milkshake theory. There is a theory out there in which both the dollar and gold can rise together, right? And that's in when you're seeing it, it really leads me to believe that Brent Johnson's theories are very much accurate. I mean, he had one of the greatest. I'll talk about that situation with the gold and the dollar here in just a second. But I just wanted to talk about Brent Johnson's presentation at the Rebel Capitalist live event, and Old Nighter was there, and he'll attest to this too. Brent Johnson did a remarkable job. He took all his evidence that he had, right? His entire presentation, all the evidence within his presentation, and he absolutely destroyed it. Like, just basically said that if you are looking at this particular evidence, he was basically destroyed his entire argument before he went right back over all the evidence again and just confirmed his theory on every single corner of everything that he had presented that had actually destroyed his argument to begin with. It was one of the coolest things I had ever seen. It was an awesome presentation, literally destroying his theory and then reconfirming his theory with all the evidence that he had just used to destroy his own theory with. Brilliant stuff. It was so cool to watch. Anyway, all right, so think about it like this. You're in a foreign nation, and there is the idea that you are going to be running into some hard times. I don't care what it is, like economic downturn, environmental event, political event, war event, whatever is happening out there, you're nervous as hell. Now, you're not necessarily wanting to get into your sovereign currency because your sovereign, not saying about you, specifically, but this is just any nation out there, right? And you're not maybe necessarily wanting to get into your sovereign currency. Well, there's really no safe haven out there other than the United States dollar when it comes to currencies. Like, yeah, you could probably get into like yen, but China's not really, that great right now. Yeah, I mean, yuan, you could, but China's not doing that great. You can get into yen, like that would probably be somewhat okay. It's kind of like a world currency in a lot of ways. You can use it there. You can get into euro, but not necessarily the greatest place. Dollar, absolutely. Safe haven, no doubt about it. Guaranteed everybody's going to be cool with it, except for maybe Russia and a couple of other countries. But for the most part, everybody's going to be cool with the dollar. So if you're nervous about your nation's currency, and where that currency is going to end up going, whether it goes into inflation or gets destroyed or, whatever political, environmental war happening is taking place, you're probably going to get into the dollar. But right now, the dollar is really despised. Like, people don't like it, right? And they're like, man, I would rather be in anything other than the dollar. Well, you really don't have any other choice except for gold. Right? So if there is some major pain being felt around the nations in the world when it comes to the global economy, and there is safe haven attractions taking place out there, there's really only two places that you can go: gold and the dollar. So these two can rise together, as the demand for a safe haven place to go has really only a couple of places that it can actually achieve, and most of that is going to be either done in the dollar or gold. This is the only places that you're going to find, right? No, there is nothing else. And then, on a lesser extent, you're going to find Bitcoin and other nations' currencies and stuff like that, but that's much lesser extent, right? I mean, Bitcoin is growing, and then the more this happens, the more I find that Bitcoin is probably going to end up being one of those safe haven type of places to go, especially if they start to really start to regulate this stuff. Because what I find interesting about Bitcoin is that how do you regulate something like that? Like, you can't stop it, right? Like, you can attempt to stop drug use, you can attempt to stop a lot of illegal activities out there, but you can't really stop the transaction of a Bitcoin. Like once it's in motion, it's off. It's happening no matter what. And so I find that to be a very, very interesting, like, kind of aspect of Bitcoin. Now, again, you can create all these rules and regulations and send people to jail if they do it or whatever. Anytime you ever take something that somebody wants and you make it illegal or you make it difficult or you put a lot of like rules and regulations and stuff like that to it, you only make it more valuable. I mean, think about it. Drugs, guns, sex, anything out there. Like you take something that somebody wants and you make it illegal or hard to get, you're going to cause it to be more valuable and the prices to go up. All right. What else can we talk about? Do we need to talk about? Oh man, look at all these super chats. I'm missing these things. Okay, Jake Northwest, thank you so much for the 5. Will the long bond pull back soon? Okay, will the long bond pull back soon as the consumer in U.S. debt can handle such a high interest? Maybe a good time to buy 20-year Treasury bonds. I personally think that now is a good time to buy Treasury bonds. Like, I mean, not saying that they won't go down more in price and that the yields won't go up. I'm not saying that ain't going to happen. That could very well happen. But if you are putting money into treasury bonds right now, I think that's a fairly safe place to end up going. And it's paying a fairly decent return on the yield. So, when it comes to like, safe haven places, I really feel that the US Treasury is not a bad place to go to. Now, I wouldn't put all my money there. Like, at all. Like that's not me. But if you had cash that you don't know what to do with and you want a place to tie it up for a little bit, I mean, yeah, like that seems to be an all right place to go. Um, it's funny because that was one of the questions that was being asked around at the Rebel Capitalist Live event in Miami was how many people have a Treasury Direct account, and how many people are in short-term treasuries and stuff like that. It was a question that was being asked around quite a bit. All right. Osama Abdu, thank you so much for the 2. Simon, how many years did you work in construction? Let's see here. So I did it off and on from some years, but I guess probably total 5 years that I did it. And it was cool because like having worked in the building supply industry before I actually did construction was really pretty handy because I already knew the materials really well and I had pretty much had an idea on how buildings went together. I just had never actually done it. So when I started getting the actual practical knowledge of putting the material together, it was no problem. I mean, I slipped right into it as if I had always done it. So yeah, being in the construction field, especially when it came to framing, I loved like framing, siding, roofing, doing that part of like building the shell of the house. I loved it. I absolutely loved doing that and summertime work. Like I didn't really like it during the wintertime, but I absolutely loved doing that during the summer. It was one of the funnest things that I had ever done in life. And it was a lot of labor and it was a lot of hard work, but it's fun because I like putting things together. I like putting stuff to, and like stepping back and then seeing the work and then going and driving and seeing it today, like going and checking out all my past projects. Like I really enjoy that. Man, look at all these comments. My goodness. Okay. All right, we're gonna go for a few more minutes. What do we got here? Does your wife not let you film in the house? No, I film in the car because the sound is better out here. And I also drive to a different location because the connection at the house is okay. Like I've done it there a few times. But no, and then like that way you don't have like the echoing like inside. Oh, good Lord. The echo inside the house, like it doesn't do for good sound. In a vehicle, being cramped little cab and having the upholstery, the seats to absorb like all the vibrations and stuff like that, it makes for recording sound so much better when you do it inside of a vehicle like this. So that's the only reason why I started doing it, was because of the sound. All right, square body Chevys are the bomb. Yes, start investing and exercising delayed gratification. Absolutely. Love your intelligence, my friend. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. No Astoria area. Moved to escape the rain. Tammy, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Always having somebody who kind of knows the area. It's kind of like you're almost like, friends. All right, good talk tonight. Hey, thank you, Lloyd. I appreciate it. Pamp it up. it. I just want a digital money that doesn't get inflated away. I can't pay in gold and silver at the restaurant, but if they have a QR code, I can send them some sats. Yeah, I totally agree. Map a Bitcoin. Now, I'm cool with Bitcoin. Like everybody knows that I'm trying to diversify into everything. Like there is nothing out there that I don't try to put my hands on and get a hold of a little bit of. Cryptocurrencies, gold, silver, dollars, treasuries, stocks, bonds, real estate, whatever it is that you can get, right? I mean, whatever it is that you feel comfortable buying. I buy it because I want to have my skin in the game, because if you have some skin in the game, then you actually pay attention to what's going on out there. Now, there's something that comes up when I think about having a gold or a Bitcoin currency. Like I don't necessarily want that for the United States. Not not now, right? Like if we were a manufacturing state, I would be all about it. I would be, yes, absolutely, gold, silver, Bitcoin. Yes, let's use a fixed currency. Darn right, right? Damn right, let's do it. But being a consumer nation where we are importing foreign production, we would be exporting gold and Bitcoin, right? Or one of those two if we went to a fixed income. And then after it was all depleted, we would have no real way of producing more and we would fall into poverty. Now, if we were a manufacturing state or at least had a balanced trade, then we could talk about it. Like talk about maybe getting a fixed currency or something like that, because then we might be able to work some kind of way out of like kind of moving ourselves back into manufacturing and supplying ourselves with stuff. But I don't see that being I don't think politically that's possible. I would just say that, right? So it would have to happen organically, and I don't think that would be possible either. I think it would have to come from like cycles of crashes and stuff like that, booms and busts. So at this point, I don't wish for a gold backed currency or a crypto back or Bitcoin kind of back currency. We're moving into a digital component of the dollar. I definitely see that happening. But as far as like a fixed, inflation proof kind of thing, like a deflationary currency like Bitcoin or gold would be, um, I think that would be a terrible idea for the United States, as most people would end up falling into poverty from it. Right? People who are aware, like us who are taking on this kind of thought, we would be okay. Like we would actually probably do quite well in a time like that. So I mean, if you wish to do much better than everybody else out there, then I guess that would be something that you could wish for. But I mean, as far as the general overall landscape out there, I just don't think people would be able to handle something like that. And the booms and busts that would come from being on a fixed gold supply, as opposed like booms and busts from the business cycle, as opposed to like the booms and busts from an inflation cycle, or I'm sorry, debt cycles. The in the inflation that comes from it, I think that is less painful to the people than what we would experience from like, being on a fixed income and a total, collapse into poverty due to the fact that we just don't manufacture for ourselves like we once did. Da, da. How do you know so much? Where do you get all your info? Huh, Joey Nye, um, I don't know, man. I really don't. I have been studying economics for a really, really long time, and I have picked up parts and pieces and all kinds of theories from every direction that you could ever possibly imagine. I mean, a lot of it, I would have to say that a big influence on the early days of my study was Peter Schiff. Like Peter Schiff was probably the number one economist that I was listening to in my early days. I read The Creature from Jekyll Island. That's what really kind of like really shift. I listened to just about every economist out there. In the early days, I had a nice list of people. It was like Doug Casey, Peter Schiff. I would listen to anything that Jim Rogers had to say. Um, Chris Martinson's like the that Crash Course series that he had put together, brilliant stuff. Loved that. You know, there was quite a few guys out there. Man, I mean, I don't know. Right now, I'm drawing a blank on them all. But I had a nice list of people that I would listen to on a regular basis. So I would pick up all these different theories. Well, a lot of times I found that like the information that I was getting is a lot of fear mongering information, right? You know, they're scaring you to try and buy into a particular direction. They're selling their program, their gold, their real estate, thing, whatever. They got their investment thing that they're trying to sell. Everybody's trying to push a particular agenda so that they can, sell their product, which everybody's got something to sell, right? I'm like the only person who doesn't have anything to sell. And the few times that I did do sponsorships, it made me feel like hell because I don't do things for sale. Like I just don't, right? I mean, I'm just out here making videos. So when I started realizing that a lot of the information that I was receiving was sales pitch, right? Well, I started taking the information on differently. I was taking it in as, okay, take in all the information, but just use what it is that you want. Take from it what you really need, right? And what I started finding from it is that there's particular economic theories that people end up falling into, and then they stick to this line of thinking, like this is the way it is or the way it should be, right? But very few people ever really look at it as just the way it is. Like this is just what's happening out here, and regardless if I like it or not, it's not up to me to like, right? And it's not up to me to change it, right? I can't change what's happening within the economy, and I can't expect anybody else to change what's going on. Like I can't expect them to change for me, and I don't expect them to change at all. Like at all. Like whatever. The change is going to be continuous and always constant, right? So to see it and just be experiencing it for what it is, then it makes it a whole lot easier to understand what it is that's taking place because most people have like it needs to be this way. And if those people weren't voting this particular way, then it wouldn't be like this. And you end up falling into the cycle of like, the way it should be. And that's not any way of thinking about it. It's not any way to look at it. It really is what is, right? If See, really what it comes down to is you have to internalize the economy for yourself because everybody has an economy that is unique to them, right? And anytime you ever take this from yourself and you throw it out there to say like, no, my life would be better if this person wasn't in office, then what you are doing is you are externalizing this what is should be yours, right? But you are blaming it out there. So if this isn't exactly perfect, then your life isn't right. Right? Because you don't have it in here, you have it out there. You have externalized this issue, right? But if you can internalize the issue and say, no, I understand what's going on out here. I don't like it. I mean, it should be this other way, but whatever. I mean, it's not up for me to like or should be. It's just for me to understand what is that's taking place. And then you conduct yourself in a way that actually looks at the economy in that fashion that says, hey, like interest rates are high. They're going to be elevated for a significant amount of time. How does this affect my life? Like, what is it that I need to do in order to, fulfill the things that I want to do and my goals and everything that I have going on? You can't look at it saying, man, I can't do this because of that. Like my goals aren't being, I can't complete my goals because the interest rates are high. Right? I mean, this is like externalizing this problem. You'll never be able to fix it, ever. It will fix whatever problems that you have if you have problems. I mean, it's better to not even look like you have problems. Like, it's better to just look at all the wonderful things that you do have going on in your life and keep adding to those things, right? Because if you focus in on your problems, guess what? You'll have them, right? But if you focus in on all the wonderful things that you have, then abundance of those things will be there all the time. Like, it's crazy on how that works. But it literally comes down to what it is that you're thinking. And it can come down to what you're thinking about the economy as well. If you're thinking the economy is garbage and trash and going to hurt you, then that's exactly what it's going to do. But if you look at the economy going, man, this is some really messed up shit, I'm going to have to really be working hard to understand what's going on so I can position myself to not get damaged. That's really what it comes down to. about that the other day since I started reading the Cantillon essay. The government really is the supreme, and we all just rent land through taxes, not own it. I mean, yeah, that I mean, when you really understand it in that fashion, it is that way, right? You really never own the land that we're on here. I mean, so yeah, you're very right about that. And then as you start reading that essay more, it starts really start thinking about like the property owners and who those property owners really are. The people that, that the essay is really referring to. It's not necessarily the people who like today in the same terms. Of course, it's a much different essay, it's 200 years old or whatever. But, when you think about like the property owners, and how it is that their behaviors conduct what it is that that economy is going to look like. Like our particular area here in the Pacific Northwest of Astoria, Oregon, is very unique, right? I mean, it's a beautiful, it's old, it's like 200-year-old city, whatever. It's a cool place to be, right? So it has some very unique things about it. It used to be a working class town. Loggers and fishermen and dive bars and rough. It was a rough town, right? It wasn't like, oh, beautiful Astoria, awesome, right? No, it wasn't that at all. It was just like Astoria is a grungy ass hellhole, get fights every Friday, Saturday night kind of thing, right? That was like Astoria for a long time. I'm not saying like I'm not trying to like it wasn't that bad, all right? I embellish, but you guys get where I'm at. Is that right now? Astoria is not that way. Astoria is very trendy, right? Has all these trendy restaurants. Even the dive bars are kind of trendy. It's all like, brought in for tourism and stuff like that. But that's what the property owners here want, right? They are not the roughhouse loggers and fishermen that they once used to be who live here. I mean, there's still those guys. They live here. I mean, I live outside of town where, the mascot is the loggers here for the high school. Right? I mean, there's still those people still exist. They're here, but really the majority of the town is now based really in like hospital district, remote workers, higher end things that are happening. Well, these higher end property owners want higher end services, and those higher end services then make it very difficult for the working class to enjoy what it is that they once had here, because the property owners that are now here have elevated what it is that the people want, or the businesses and the desires from what the people want, right? And this is, I mean, it's gentrification is really what I'm describing, but this is really what happens when new money comes in from from whatever direction. And in this case, and for Astoria, it's coming in from like a retirement community that's being built, the hospital district. There's other money that's not necessarily coming from logging and fishing. All right. All right. Man, look at all these comments. Okay. Let's see here. Renters are a strain on the local community. The property taxes for apartments is much lower considering students that lives in those apartments and attend public schools. Huh. Renters pay the tax for the property. Chicago doesn't pay zero into the suburbs. Public universities have a way lower subsidization than most are recent past. Oregon is too white. That's kind of interesting to think about. It's too white, and we have like rampant homeless. Huh. I'll take my chance. Taxes and all. The only way you beat them is to make more money than they thought you were going to make, and work harder than they thought you were going to work, and work smart. Yeah, try stop paying taxes. See how optional they are. Yeah. Dude, how long you stream? Probably till right about now. I think I'm done. I was just looking at some of these comments that were coming through, but I think I've pretty much had it for the night. My throat's starting to get a little scratchy here. So, do you think that diesel prices and availability are going to be affected by the war in the Middle East? Well, I'm sure they will. But I don't. I don't necessarily think these things. I mean, they're going to affect, and they're probably going to have some kind of impact. But as far as like having any lasting global like in economic impact that's going to say like be there for like go down in the history books or something, I don't see that taking place. It might be issues that come from it. I imagine they'll probably be extreme, but again, they will probably most likely be felt and then eventually dissipated. Time to wrap it up before the mosquitoes come out. Yeah, for sure. All right, dude, keep dreaming. The legal right of a taxpayer to decrease the amount of what otherwise would be his taxes or altogether avoid them by means which the law permits cannot be doubled. Justice Gregory Sutherland. That's what I love about All Nighter. He's like this sovereign citizen. He has all the, like, he pops off with it right now, and I love that, where you can find that information, like, almost right away. All right. Okay, very cool, guys. This was so much fun hanging out, talking everything. I thought it was a really good stream. We covered some lot of good information. I think we've talked a lot about this housing market as far as like what's going to be able to bring inventory or prices down or foreclosures, all that stuff. We've covered a lot of this stuff. The more we cover it, the more we pay attention to what's happening out there, the more, discussions we have on it, the better decisions that we're going to be able to make for our lives, just like what we were talking about earlier. So, I appreciate having these conversations and, everybody adding, to the stream with all the great comments. I mean, it's continuous. I could not believe how many comments have come in on this one. It's been wonderful. I mean, with 313 viewers, 282 likes, that's awesome. $110 in super chats because you guys are just so supportive of the channel. You're very, very, very awesome, in that sense. I just can never thank you enough for that. I mean, changed my life in a lot of ways, in more ways, and actually in every way. I shouldn't even say a lot of ways. In every way, my life has changed. So thank you, everybody, for being here. It's been awesome. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know. We appreciate your knowledge. Well, thank you, Woke Police. And thank you for that super chat earlier. It was really cool. Matt Bittner, all-nighter, is there such a thing as sovereign citizen lawyer who's been successful defending clients? Eek. Thanks, Simon, calling good times on the die. Yeah, I need to get the thing hooked up and get those dice hung up that you gave me. Matt Bittner, I don't know. I think the sovereign citizen, I don't know if there's necessarily, I don't think that's like a lawyer's job. I think that's an individual thing. I think it's something that you should learn for yourself and really use it in a sense that is much like, understanding the economy for yourself. If you really understand that sovereign citizen, you don't need anybody else. You don't need a lawyer. You don't need anything out there. Your authority is higher than everybody else's, and so there, if you really understand it and know it well, like you have that stuff cemented into your tongue and your brain and your thoughts and your heart, then you don't need any of that stuff. You can conduct yourself by yourself. You don't need a lawyer, right? You don't need any of that stuff, because everything that is being said to you, you can fire back off and can retain your authority, never once having to stand under them, and always being like a free and sovereign person. I don't know how else to explain it like that, but that's ultimately what it comes down to. And you can't give it to anybody else. So you can't expect somebody else to defend that for you. That's something that only you can do for yourself. All right. Lawyers are beholden to the bar. That's right. All righty, guys, that's fun. I love talking that sovereign citizen stuff, but I'm really talking out of my wheelhouse. I don't know much about that, but there's some guys out there who really do. And I suggest everybody like look into it and really understand, what that is, what it means, how it is that,
people have gotten themselves into trouble doing it because it's not really something that you should just go blindly messing with, but it is definitely something that everybody should study and to understand what it is, I mean, and well put, Simon. Thank you, all nighter, man. You're the best. God, I can't talk now. You are the best, man. All right. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.